Hi there, I'm Scott, and this is GreatScott Knitting, a podcast, and welcome to episode 9. If you're a returning viewer or a subscriber, I really want to thank you for continuing on with watching this journey and this podcast. If you're new to this channel and to this episode of a podcast, thank you for checking it out. I hope you enjoy it. Today is October 13th, 2020. Yesterday was my 54th birthday. Here in Wichita, Kansas, it's going to be a beautiful 80-degree day, perfectly clear, lovely weather. So love October. October is my favorite month. Of course, it's my birthday month. So I really enjoy this time of year. This is a knitting and fiber related podcast, and so let's jump into this episode and see what it brings us. Okay, so finished objects over the past few weeks. I do have a few that I want to share with you. So to start off with, I have finished my Van Dyke check scarf. This is a scarf pattern that I pretty much just kind of made up on the fly. It is a stitch pattern from Barbara Walker's A Treasury of Knitting. It's the Van Dyke check pattern. Let me see if I can show a little of that. So, of course, there's my famous model of Spock. He does all my modeling for me. He's very stoic and useful. So this is the Van Dyke check pattern. It's a real simple pattern to memorize. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that because that's just for me. I found it easy to memorize this pattern. So it's just a nice little scarf. The yarn that I used for this was Red Heart with Love Metallic. It's 99% acrylic, 1% other. I'm not exactly sure what that other is, but as you can see, there's this red sparkly fiber that runs through the yarn. Overall, I have to say that I'm not particularly fond of this yarn. It was a little rough on the hands, and I think that was not so much because of the acrylic, but more because of the that little metallic feeling. Well, it's really just plastic, but that it's a really rough, sparkly fiber that goes through. So it was not particularly pleasant on the fingers. So I wasn't that crazy about it. But the finished product is nice. I tend to wash up some of these things that feel rougher to me as I'm knitting with them. I wash them up and then soak them in fabric softener to give them just a little better feel on the skin. But it was a nice project. It didn't take particularly too long, so I just had a lot of other projects going on so I didn't get it done very quickly. My next finished object is the Ribs and Arrow Shawl by Benjamin Matthews Designs. It is a really nice size shawl in worsted weight. Let me just kind of show that to you. This shawl is one that I saw it on Instagram right as Benjamin Matthews was getting ready to publish it, and I was like, oh my god, I love that shawl, I've got to knit it. So as soon as it became available, I purchased the pattern, and I was wanting to dye some yarn that I could use with that pattern. And my first set didn't turn out exactly as I had hoped or wanted. So I had to stop and rethink about that. But in the meantime, I was just itching to cast on. So I cast on using some just acrylic yarn that I had in my stash. For those of you who may be familiar with this channel, you know that I have not particularly large, but a bunch of acrylic yarn that I'm trying to work through because I want to replace most of my stash with natural-based fibers. So I'm trying to work through a lot of my acrylics. So I cast on just to get a feel for the pattern and what it involved before I dyed up yarn. I did a second attempt on dyeing the yarn and coming up with something. Next thing I know, I had gone on to a second color, the third color, the fourth color bands, and it wasn't long before I was at the mosaic pattern at the end, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have a finished shawl now. So actually, really easy pattern. I highly recommend it. Just a lot of fun to knit. It's really easily memorizable. So you don't have to like spend your time staring at that at the pattern. And even the mosaic section is relatively simple. You just have to pay a little bit of attention as you're doing it and be careful of your tension as well in that. Great thing about this pattern that I learned something. So I have to take my hat off to Benjamin Matthews Designs because his bind off that he used on it is an Icelandic bind off. It's generally stretchy, and it just has that look perfect for garter stitch. If you have a garter stitch section at the end of your knitting and you want something that just sort of blends in, absolutely amazing. So I'm glad to have learned that technique and to have this shawl. The fiber that I use for this is Loops and Threads Impeccable Solids in the color of blue. The yellow I think is called Butterscotch. The brown band is Taupe, and this teal is called Aqua. It's 100% acrylic. It is a bit heavier than worsted. It's really probably more of an Aran. Definitely not bulky, but it's a little heavier than just a standard worsted. At least it feels like it to me. So the fabric is really very heavy. It's almost like a blanket. I was thinking this would make a really great baby blanket design to do something up like this. So a really nice shawl. I'll probably gift that to somebody as well over the holidays. All right. So the next project I completed finally let me just make sure I'm showing you the correct side. It's always fun when you can't tell which is the right side and wrong side on these things. So really, it must not matter. So this is the Castor Shawl, and that is by Anthony Casalena. Sorry about that. Quick change of venue. What were we? We were talking about the Castor Shawl, which I recently finished. Castor Shawl is by Anthony Casalena, and I really, again, I loved this project. It was really nice. So there's Spock again, my handy dandy model. Yeah, so this yarn is a Knit Crate subscription yarn. It is Audine Wool's Sport Shine by Knit Crate in the colorway of Sky. And that colorway has these different blue and purple spots. It's a speckled yarn. But I thought it was really well suited for this project. This pattern called for a fingering weight yarn, but this sport weight yarn worked out really nicely. I simply I changed the my needle size to sort of meet gauge, and the gauge on this is really loose based on what the pattern calls for. I was a little uncomfortable with it as I was knitting it because I was thinking, wow, this just seems really too open. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to press on, and I'm glad I did because it's a lovely. I mean, it'd be great for spring. It is certainly not a winter shawl, but it is really lovely, lightweight. This Ogden Sport Shine is 80% superwash merino, 20% tencel. So it's lovely. It's soft. Yeah, it's a really lovely piece. Can't wait to gift that to someone during the holidays as well. Okay. So the next item I want to talk about is okay, yes, the I was working last time I talked about a project I was working on in conjunction with my spouse, my husband. My husband builds working model roller coasters. And he was working on a model, and as part of the theming for the roller coaster station, he wanted a roof made out of knitted cloth. And so it needed to be very fine gauge, very small stitch type of thing in stripes. So I was able to do that for him, and I was a little concerned that maybe I couldn't, but I was able to do that. And here's how that turned out. The so this station roof, I had to stitch in some metal supports along the edges to maintain that sort of curved effect, and so it made it look stretched across the top, which it is it is stretched across the top, but it was sagging somewhat because it is like it's 24 inches by 20 inches, so it's a good size swatch, if you will. So I stitched in these metal supports along the edge that help hold it up, but it looks more natural, like it's just naturally stretched. It doesn't look like there's these metal rods in the edges. So was able to do that. So one thing I want to do is encourage you to go watch that video for that working model roller coaster. They are really cool. This is a large model that he has built. He usually does 1/4 scale, and this is a 1/24 scale. So it is much larger than he normally builds. Go see it. I'll have the link to his YouTube channel below, specifically to the Maelstrom model roller coaster. Go check it out. It's really cool. It's a short video, but really, I think you'll love it because it's a really fascinating hobby, and I really think it's really cool. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the second set of yarn that I have dyed up for the Ribs and Arrows shawl. So I didn't like the first set I dyed up, so I went and set up another set of dyeing. and I dyed up this set, all these together. So this set is, the base is Patton's Classic Worsted. Yeah, I know it's not going to be as soft a shawl, but it's actually similar to the acrylic feel. But it's a lighter weight than that acrylic yarn that I used. So I did tonals. So this is using food coloring. This is simply Wilton's Brown. And I really loved the tonal effect of that. And so this is going to be that consistent stripe that goes in between the main colors. Then Wilton's Royal Blue. The tonalities are a little blown out. I don't know if you can really catch them. Not really. But it's a really nice subtle tonal blue in Royal Blue. And then Wilton's Kelly Green. And finally, Wilton's Teal. And so that's going to be my set for my official version of the Ribs and Arrows shawl by Benjamin Matthews Designs. All right. I was able to complete those. Oh, cool. So those are my finished objects. I have finally gotten some things off the needles. So now I'm going to be looking for things to cast on. But I still have a few things ready to go. So works in progress. I do have a couple of works in progress right now. The first one is sort of an ongoing project. This is my scrunchable scarf that I'm working on. Again, I dyed up some mini skeins just to practice mixing colors in dyes. So there's this pinkish red, a good orange, a yellow, green, and then I do have my two mini skeins in blue and violet that I'm still waiting to go into with this. The scrunchable scarf is by Susan McComb. It is a single row pattern of kind of a mistake rib feel to it. Really simple, easy knit. I have not gotten as far on that as I would like to, but other projects are of more interest to me. But I do try and get a couple rows in on that every day or so. The next object I have on the needles is a new sock. Now, this sock is on a skein of yarn that I dyed up. That skein is, where is that? Okay, here we go. This is the Dyer Supplier 80/20 fingering weight yarn. So it's 80% superwash merino wool, 20% nylon. And I did it in a sort of a bluish violet. It was really mixing blue food coloring with black food coloring to sort of get this violet, dark violet color, and then dip dyed it to get this gradient into this light blue. And here is the sock that I'm working on. This is the Sockmatician's Toe Ups sock by Nathan Taylor, who is Sockmatician on YouTube. It's really more of a recipe and not so much of a prescribed pattern. It basically tells you how to knit a toe-up sock, how to calculate the number of stitches to cast on, the number of rows to knit, how to do the heel flap or the heel turn, the heel flap, the gusset. It is just a plain heel flap or a plain heel flap gusset heel construction. It's just basic information about how to make the calculations for that, not so much a specific stitch pattern. Now, because it is a plain recipe, across the top, I have decided to add a 2x2 rib. Now, I have knit this pattern before on a different size needle using a different yarn. So with this, I did have to re-knit a gauge swatch because I went down from a 3mm needle to a 2.25, and of course, then there's this new yarn that I've never knit with before. So it changed the number of stitches I needed to cast on, and of course, it's changing all the other numbers that I need to have. So this is as far as I am. It's looking really cool. It has this stripy look to it, but there's also sort of this very subtle pooling aspect kind of going on, especially along this section here. Or it's not that direction, but it's this direction. Anyway, really loving the feel of it. It's super soft, and I love how that's coming along. Because it is so much smaller, the gauge is so much tighter. It's taking me longer to get further, so I just need to be consistent and work on this on a regular basis. I have knit on it pretty much every day for a while now, but not for long periods of time because I just haven't had big blocks of time to do that. Okay. So currently I am hoping to find some other things to cast on. I am planning on casting on another Ribs and Arrows shawl as soon as I can get those caked up. But then that'll be pretty much, I'll be looking for some other things to cast on as well. So I think the next thing I want to talk about are some of the acquisitions I have. All right, so we'll start off with some of my stash enhancements. I got some bare yarn from Dyer Supplier. They, over the summer, have had some supply line issues for some of their yarn bases. And one of those yarn bases is the 75/25 merino nylon fingering. So just their basic sock yarn. They just didn't have it in for like a couple of months. So when it did finally become available, I picked up a couple of bags of it. There's 5 skeins each. This is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. In fingering weights, it's approximately 415 yards of 3-ply yarn. So that should set me up for a while to be able to do some dyeing. I also picked up some fixed circular knitting needles from Knit Picks. Because I have slowly started moving into being a sock knitter, which really actually has come about because of my dyeing, because I've been doing dyeing of a lot of sock weight yarn, simply because I don't know, that's just what I started out with, and that's what I'm enjoying. I have a lot of one-of-a-kind skeins of yarn that some of them will work together in shawl patterns, but a lot of them just a lot of them just there's just not don't have enough of a colorway or something to pair with it to make a shawl. So socks and hats and cowls would be my next go-to. So I've started, learning how to knit socks as we've seen. So I didn't have in my circular knitting sets any very many sock weight or sock knitting needles. The smallest I had was a 3 millimeter, and I only had one. No, I have two pairs of 3 millimeter uh, knitting needles, knitting tips for my circular sets. So I went and got some fixed circulars from Knit Picks, which I desperately needed. And I picked up a 2 millimeter, a 2.25, a 2.5, and I think a 2.75 on 24-inch cables. So, and I use 24-inch cables because I do enjoy, or the way I do my socks right now is magic loop. At some point, I do want to try out like a 9-inch circulars. So that'll be something to explore as well. Before I talk about my true stash enhancements, I'll talk about my yarn first. So, as those of you who have watched before, you may know that I am subscribed to Knit Crate, and with that subscription, they also have yarn that they sell from their website. That is not part of a subscription box. Some of it is subscription box yarns from past months, and sometimes it's exclusive bases and colorways that they have in their shop. And for Knit Crate members, you get a substantial discount on those yarns. So a couple months back, the Knit Crate in the middle of the summer, the Knit Crate yarn was that I got in my subscription was this Uru yarn Cotton Basics, which is 100% Pima cotton, in this tonal variegated violet. Really beautiful. It kind of looks more blue on the camera, but it's a lovely violet color. Let's see. Yeah, this one here on this side with that violet. So I picked up a companion set in one of their other colorways. This one's called Pavement, and it's this tonal variegated gray tones, which I think will look really nicely paired with the this other colorway called what's this one called? Stardust, which is this violet color. So I think I'm going to look for a project where I can use these two together. It is 100% Pima cotton. They're really super soft and just really lovely. And these are I think they're DK weight. Yeah, these are a DK weight. So I'm going to be looking for probably a shawl pattern that I could use those in. So I picked those up really, really cheap. And so this past month, for the month of September, they had this Audine Wools Sleek, and I picked up this lovely, gorgeous green in my Knit Crate subscription box. This is called Unwind, and this base is a worsted weight base of 55% merino, 30% alpaca, 15% mulberry silk. So that just absolutely feels amazing. They had two other colorways for last month that I wanted to have as well. So I picked up these at a substantial discount. This one's called Bliss, which is this lovely orange color. And then this one's called Utopia, which is a very pastel teal, more and kind of on the green side of teal, but it's just a lovely, again, really pretty. They're super soft with that alpaca in it, and have that kind of a nice sheen to it from the silk. So I'm excited to use those. Probably won't use them all in in one pattern. I don't know how well they pair together. I mean, they're not bad. It'd be certainly vibrant. I will say that. But those are a lovely blend. Now, yeah, and those were the Audine wools that I picked up. Okay, so because I'm in my birthday month, I picked up one of these for myself. All of a sudden, Romper Room came to mind, didn't it? So I picked up a knitting machine from Michaels. This is the what is it called? The Loops and Threads Knit Quick knitting machine. It's got it's a 40 stitch item, or 40 stitch 40 needles on this circumference. So it makes a really tight fitting hat, or I'm not sure what I would use in terms of creating finished objects, but what I am using it for primarily at this point are to create sock blanks that I can dye. So I have played around with it a little bit over the past couple of days that I've had it. I picked it up about 4 days ago, so it was before my birthday. So I did a test of some worsted weight yarn in a tube and then as a flat panel. And then I dyed them up. I dip dyed the tube in Wilton's Violet to get that breaking. And then I did striping, this little sort of stripy pattern using some Wilton's food coloring in citric acid. And I can't remember what the colors were. They were just some leftover things that I had. And so I created those just to play around with creating sock blanks and then creating some skeins of yarn. This one has sort of a blue, green, teal with this pink, this pinkish color to it. It kind of looks like Spumoni ice cream to me, so that's kind of what I'm calling it, is Spumoni. Again, the base that I used was Patton's classic worsted 100% wool, and then here's that Broken Violet skein, which turned out really nicely. Just to kind of play around with it. So primarily what I'm going to be using this tool for will be to create sock blanks for dyeing, or just those blanks for dyeing. I'm not sure which one I prefer. Probably flat, creating flat, but those are harder to crank out and take longer to crank out than just simply doing a tube. So I probably won't be using this for hats or cowls because the gauge for that seems to be a little tight. The circumference for that is a little tight. So 40 stitches doesn't make a very big hat or cowl. Be great for kids, but not so great for adults. But I've been wanting to have this to play with it for dyeing primarily. So that'll be a lot of fun. The way I got it is I do surveys online that give me points that I could redeem for Michael's gift cards. And that's how I paid for it, because it's a little pricier for me. I tend to be rather frugal and cheap. So that's how I picked that up. So I only paid like $20 for it out of pocket, but I had some gift cards that I used for it. So yeah, those are my acquisitions over the past few weeks, which should keep me busy. Like I said, I'll be casting on that Ribs and Arrows shawl shortly. So wow, for me, quite a bit of fiber has come into my stash of late. So I need to really get busy in knitting more. Okay, so what else have I been up to over the past few weeks? Well, about 2 weeks ago, well, hang on, let me go back a little bit further. Um, Last year, and when I started this podcast, I had a net. My husband and I, were playing host to one of our grand nephews who had been having some troubles in school and with his single mother, where they lived back in Northwest Missouri. So he was living with us, and he lived with us for about a year and a half and went to school here. So for this school year, his mother, or he and his mother, decided that she wanted him back home and he wanted to go back home. So he moved back home and is there, which left us basically kind of empty nesters. So about a month ago, another one of my grandnephews, who happens to live in that same town, different family, a different, same side of the family, but one of my different nieces. Her son has had kind of a really rough upbringing, rough life growing up. He was supposed to have been a senior this year, but was a junior due to getting sidetracked at school, and he was starting to have some problems with my niece that he was living with, and she called up and said, "Hey, would you be willing to offer your helping launch him out of high school and into adulthood?" My niece happens to be raising 6 kids, 3 of her own and 3 of her sisters, and so we were like, sure. This grandnephew is a really great kid. Just has had things in his life have not gone as well as they really need to for most kids. So he agreed. He's 18 years old, so really he could make the decision himself. He agreed to come live with us, finish up high school, and then he wants to go on into a trade school. And so yeah, he's here. He's doing really, really well. He's going to an alternative high school, which allows for students that are behind to get caught up. And he's likely to graduate this year. Not even though he was enrolled as a junior, he's now enrolled as a senior and will probably finish up this year. The program he's in is a self-paced program, so it's really, really great, and he's doing super well. So I'm excited to have him in our home and to kind of help finish up his education and raising him up into adulthood a little bit. So that's exciting. That's kind of the big thing that's going on here at our home here in Wichita. So some other things I'm doing, of course, I'm trying to keep up with all of my favorite knitting blogs. To those of you out there that have either recently started a knitting channel here on YouTube or have a long established one, I want to let you know that sometimes you may not realize it, but you are impacting people, you're inspiring people, and I really do appreciate the work that you all put in. It has helped make this crazy period of time in my life, at least, a bit more enjoyable. I feel much more connected to the knitting community at large. And so I just want to thank you for providing your services as knitters, as bloggers. Thank you. So, and that's what I kind of hope that my channel provides other people as well, is the feeling of a little bit of connection in this crazy time. In addition to trying to keep up on all my knitting blogs, I have been watching a little bit of Netflix and some streaming TV. One of the things I have been watching, or actually just finished watching, is the new Legends of Monkey on Netflix. It's a series that They just put out the second season. That of course I finished it. It is a New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand based production of a story that is the story of the Monkey King, which is based on a 16th century Chinese novel, which was later turned into Japanese anime, which became very popular, I guess, in Australia. And so this Australian production company has taken those storylines and updated them a little bit for this particular series. The series is really, really very Australian, but it's very, very interesting. It's the story of the Monkey King who was trapped in a mountain. Who had in the story was that he betrayed the gods, the immortal gods, and allowed the demons, immortal demons, to come and subjugate the humans in the land. And one of the things that the Monkey King had done was that he had stolen some sacred scrolls, and so the gods trapped him in the mountain. So a monk helps him escape the mountain. This is 500 years after he was trapped in the mountain. A monk helps him escape, and then they find a couple other gods, and they're going around the country trying to find the missing scrolls, doing battle with the demons, and helping humans where they can. So it's a really, really fun, simple, kind of fluffy adventure story. Great for catching up on knitting. It's not deep, it's not philosophical, but it's just very enjoyable. Speaking of not very deep or philosophical, the other thing I've watched was the movie on Netflix, Vampires versus the Bronx. Cute little show. Sort of it has a very Scooby-Doo aspect to it, where the scrappy young kids discover that there are vampires taking over and buying out businesses in the Bronx. So it's very much like a conglomerate business coming into an area and blood sucking the small businesses out of existence. So there's that really ham-handed metaphor going on, but it's also a cute little show. Again, great knitting fodder. You don't have to pay great attention to it to enjoy it. And then finally, I just started rewatching Schitt's Creek because they just released the 6th and final season on Netflix. So I've gone back and I'm rewatching the previous seasons, and then I will finish out with the last season. So those are the things I've been watching and doing outside of my knitting world. All right, so now it's time for yarn everything I should probably already know. And we're going to be talking about cellulose fiber, so fiber from plants. I have been reading the Knitter's Book of Yarn by Clara Parks, and so here we go. Cellulose fibers. So some basic general characteristics of plant-based fibers is that it likes to pull heat away from the body. That makes it very different from your protein fibers, which generally trap heat in or close to your body because of the way it holds air between the fibers. Another aspect of your plant fibers is that it stretches as you wear it, but it doesn't tend to bounce back very well, not like your protein fibers. It tends to be a little more dense, a heavier feel to it, and it is also susceptible to mold and mildew in the damp, which is very different from your protein fibers, which are actually more susceptible to bugs and being being eaten by other creatures. So your basic, most common plant fiber material for yarns and the type of fibers that we use is cotton. So cotton comes from, it's grown in the seeds of the cotton plant, which is called the gossypium, and it's in the seed pod, which makes it different from other plant-based fibers. So at maturity, the pod will pop open, displaying these fibers that are inside, which look a little bit like wool. So then these seed pods are picked, and they go through a cotton gin, to separate the rough fiber from that nice fluffy fiber. The fiber is then carded and combed, and then it's really ready for spinning into yarns and threads. Cotton fiber is extremely strong and durable, especially compared to your protein-based fibers like wool. It's really great for warmer climates because it will absorb water and then allow it to evaporate off of the fiber. The feel of cotton can often depend on how it's prepared. So the combing process, as well as the spinning process, can affect how soft it feels against the skin. Now there are different, just like with protein-based fibers, there's different fiber lengths that affect the nature of that fiber, the yarn or the textile that you're creating. So your short staple or your short length fibers, great for everyday use. Long staple cottons tend to be softer and more luxurious. Extra long, of course, even better. So extra long would be things like your Egyptian cotton, which are one of the longest and most luxurious of cottons. Your Pima cotton, which was actually developed in the United States and test grown in the area around Arizona where the Pima Indians were, and so that's how it got its name. And it's a variety of cotton. One of the more durable, but it's also a very soft and lovely cotton. You can treat cotton, similar how wool can be treated to make it less feltable through superwash. Cotton can be made to feel, to be stronger and sometimes a bit more softer, and also maybe a little bit more durable through mercerization. Mercerization or mercerized cotton has gone through a caustic soda solution, which makes the fibers swell up permanently and also helps to straighten them out, making the yarn becomes, or the fibers become, much stronger. They also become more reflexive, more luminous, something like maybe more of a silk feel or look to them. The other effect that this can have is that less hair, or not less hair, but less air can be trapped in the fiber. Trapping of air also makes the fiber warmer, and so when you're trapping less air, it's going to create a cooler fabric. Flax. So moving away from cotton, the next thing we'll talk about is the flax plant, which allows us to produce linen. Linen is made from flax fibers, but unlike cotton, the stalk of the plant is what is used to create linen. So the plant is either cut or can also be pulled up by the root. It's then dried. Then seeds are separated, and the seeds can be useful, of course, for growing additional flax, or it's also used as a nutritional supplement. So it's also used in food. The stalks then go through a process called retting, which is basically soaking it in moisture or in water with some added bacteria to help decompose some of the what is called the pectin around this stock fibers. Helps separate the stalks into a more fibrous material. After the retting process is done, then it goes into a process called scutching, which removes the woody portion of the plant fiber, and that's done primarily by taking the stalks and putting them through rollers. Nowadays, those would be metal rollers. Once upon a time, they would have been more like wooden rollers to squeeze those stalks. And in that process, we get linseed oil, which, again, another useful byproduct of the production of linen. Or maybe the linen is what is the byproduct of linseed oil production. Not really sure which comes first. The fibers are then go through a process called heckling, where the shorter fibers are removed by combing the fiber to align all of the fibers, and then the fibers can then be spun into threads and yarns. Linen fiber tends to be a little stronger than cotton. It's highly absorbent, great for warmer climates because it wicks moisture away from the skin. Like cotton, it lacks elasticity, so it does not bounce back very well. But you do get a really beautiful drape. When you first use new linen fibers, they tend to feel rough, but as they are worn and washed and used, they start to soften up and feel much more supple against the skin. Linen fibers, my understanding is that they are great for dyeing because they take dye up really nicely. Now, I do a lot of dyeing of protein fibers. I have not gotten into dyeing plant fibers, but at some point I would like to play with dyeing using fiber reactive dyes with plant-based material. The next type of fiber we're going to talk about is hemp, because it's also one of the more popular types of fiber historically, but it's also making sort of a comeback. The hemp fiber comes from the cannabis sativa plant. Yes, cannabis, just like marijuana. Because of that relationship to the marijuana plant, it has been regulated almost to the point of prohibition in the United States. Over recent years, many of those prohibitions have been relaxed, allowing for hemp production to return to the United States. I know Kansas has quite a few farms that have started growing hemp for the use in creating of fibers. The cannabis sativa plant has been bred primarily for its use as a plant for fiber, for its seeds, and for oil. The medicinal qualities have basically most of those have been bred out, so it's unlike a regular marijuana plant, which has more of those medicinal qualities to them. Hemp fiber is produced very much like your flax fibers to produce linen. It has a lot of the same types of nature to it. It is rough in its original form, but as it's washed and worn, it becomes softer. Very less susceptible to mold and mildew than cotton. But again, it lacks that elasticity that allows it to bounce back. So those are some of the key things that I picked up about different fibers. I would really like to try to dye some of maybe a cotton linen blend or a cotton hemp blend to just kind of play around with them. Or actually, I would just maybe like to find some good places where I can just pick up some pre-dyed fibers just to be able to knit with them for some summer garments and summer shawls. So that is the class for today. All right, so that's we're down to the end of the show. thanks for tuning in today. You know, full disclosure, I have tried recording this episode for like 2 weeks now. And, you know, sometimes I would get interrupted, or one time I was like recorded the entire thing and then went to check on it, to check its quality, and the sound hadn't recorded. So I'm like, think I'm finally through it. I've had to do it a little bit piecemeal because things I just keep getting interrupted. And it's just been, I've been wanting to get this episode out there for you all for a while now. So I hope you've enjoyed it. And so if you did, be sure and click the thumbs up. And if you want to see more of this content and be informed of this content, so go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're doing, what you're up to. And you can also find me on social media. On Facebook, I do have a Facebook page called GreatScott Knitting. I have an Instagram presence of GreatScott Knitting, and I'm on Ravelry as GreatScott KCMO. So thank you for watching, and enjoy your knitting.